So I know roughly it looks just about like that. And now I just go down and line it up perfect. And there is my 30-degree angle. So again, I went this trajectory because I'm going to be cutting on this side of the part. If I went this way here, that would mean I'd have to be cutting with my tool on this side of the part. And that gets very cumbersome to get your tool down in here and get all the way over. It's a lot easier to cut from this side. So I'm going back here and we're going to lock this in at a 30-degree angle. And then we'll add our tool back to the mix. All right, so we're good there. Now I'm going to transition here and add our tool back in. And my tool post, no matter what I'm doing with my tool post, I always have it so that one dovetail is facing the chuck and one dovetail is facing away from me. That's just the easiest way to do it. So mounting our tool here now, you could do this two ways. You could use a left-hand tool and you could come from here and pull out. When you do something like that, it kind of gets obscure with your setup here and how to get the left-hand tool in there. And the other thing is when you're cutting, you're going to be kind of pulling everything away from the machine. So it kind of starts separating. Nothing is as rigid. It doesn't cut as clean. If you go and you cut this direction in, you're compressing all the axes together and you're going to get a cleaner cut. It's going to cut more rigidly. Everything's going to perform a little bit better. So I tend to use the right-hand tool to make this cut. So I'm going to take out my left-hand tool here. And we're gonna add our right-hand tool. So this guy I'll just set off to the side for now. And I'm gonna take my right-hand tool with the cutting edge on the left side and I'm going to cut that angle like this. So I'm just gonna mount this on a different post. All right. And mounting this onto our tool post here. And this is where we need to figure out how we want to orient this. Now, realistically, you can orient this numerous different directions. I could do it here. It's going to work just fine. I could orient it like this. It's going to work just fine. When it's going to be a problem is if I were to orient it so far that when it makes its cutting motion, the radius wasn't leading the cut and the heel of the tool, the clearance of the tool, was actually making contact with our part before the radius does. So that's when we're gonna have a problem. So I need to put it back probably something more like that or even flatter. And I usually run it like this because then I get a lot of clearance and I don't have to worry about the tool, rubbing on the heel of it as I'm cutting. So I'm gonna orient it back like this direction so that it cuts right there without that heel interfering at all. So back there and about, I don't know, probably something like that should be pretty good. And realistically, you can just go straight perpendicular too, and that's gonna work just fine for what we're doing because all it's gonna do is cut with that tip of the tool. So from here, we're gonna lock our tool post down. And one thing to do when you're messing around with a tool post here, you just want to make sure you get it back on here and centered. Sometimes I've seen students will have this thing pushed way to one side and almost falling out. And if you're doing something like that, you can have problems with it wanting to break. I've seen these compounds break because somebody clamped it down like that and then they put a bunch of tool pressure into it and something snapped. So try to get that thing, roughly centered over top of there. All right. So we're locked down there. We have our 30 degrees set. And again, whenever we cut with an angle, we use the carriage and the cross slide to position our tool, but not to do the cutting. The cutting's all going to happen, with the compound itself. And right here, when you have a nice point like this, it's very easy to get your tool centered. Like you can see right now, my tool is above the center line there. So I can just do this visually and just bring that down until I get it where I want it to be. It looks pretty good right there. So we'll lock that in. And then we're gonna just take a cut across here. One thing I do have to watch out for is I don't have, I ran out of travel. So that'll happen sometimes where I'm completely out of stroke travel going forward. What I need to do is just back this off and position this forward and then reposition my compound by going back on it here. And then I'm gonna check and make sure I have enough stroke to get all the way through, which it looks like I do. And I'm gonna be very close to these jaws here, so I just need to be careful I don't run into something. Otherwise, I think we are pretty much good there. So again, all the cutting happens with the compound. So back this off, give it some RPM. So I'm just gonna go about 350 for this. And I don't really need to take much material off this at all. All I really wanted to do is just dust this. So I'm just coming up and I'm just barely touching. And right there, it's just barely touching right now. I might move it in, zero it. I might move it in, I don't know. We'll say 20 thousandths here. And I'll give it a little splash of coolant. And we're just gonna lightly come across this and make a nice, clean, concentric cut. And what we're doing is we're smoothing out any runout that was in the part previously. And as long as it cleans up all the way around, we're going to be good. And realistically, the surface finish out here is not that critical because it's not even going to cut out at that or touch the part at that point. It only makes contact in the first little bit. So as long as that first little bit cut, that's really all that matters. And I could go, if I wanted to, and make another cut all the way across there and make it pretty, but I don't really care. As long as the end of it is all smooth and it cut all the way around there, which it did, I'm going to be happy. And now this portion's running concentric, and that again is where my part will sit on there with that center drill that I had before. So now that'll sit right on there. So that part there is really all that matters. Up in here really isn't critical whatsoever. And again, if you can't see if you've cut the whole thing or not, you could go through and put some Dykem on here, and then you could cut it with Dykem on there and you'll see the blue or the red disappear as you're cutting. For me, I'm happy with what I've got there, but that's another option I'll give you folks. All right, so that is looking good. Now I've got to tool all the rest of this up to get ready to make a cut on my real part. So there's a little bit of finagling here. We're gonna go through, and this is all cumbersome right now with the compound pushing out that direction because I need to bring the tailstock forward and get up inside of here. So I'm gonna move this back just to a more normal angle so that's not going to interfere with me. And again, I never set this thing here or I never set it there. I usually just throw it in somewhere like this and call it good. That's not going to affect us unless we're using it to cut an angle. So I'm happy there. Going to take my wrench and loosen up the tool post and just spin this back like I always do. Dovetail this way, dovetail away from me. And this is where things will get a little different now. So I'm going to take out my tailstock here. And before I do that, I'm gonna take out my center drill. Taking this out, we're gonna take the drill chuck out of here. So I back this off all the way. The drill chuck releases. And we're trading that in for our live center. So our live center again has a bearing inside of here. This has a taper. It's going to seat right inside of here. So we're gonna make sure everything is clean and bring it forward and kind of give it that quick snap. And that will lock that in. And now we're gonna be bringing this up to get our part between here. So if I go here right now and I put this up where it needs to be, lock that, we've got it supported between centers right now. Now the only problem is it's only making